So in this sprint review, we have quite a lot to cover, so I'm just going to dive right in. So first of all, we how to use your story last sprint related to creating this community page. And at the end of the sprint, we said that all the acceptance criteria associated with that user story have been complete. But after we completed the sprint, we learned of a couple of new pieces of acceptance criteria. So we added a couple new tasks associated to this user story to our current sprint and to accomplish those acceptance criteria. So I'm just going to go ahead and demonstrate that right now. So the first piece of acceptance criteria was that the date on recovered food and distributed food should autofill to the current date. So I'll just go ahead and demonstrate that. So as you can see, I just opened the form and it's automatically set to today. They can edit it if they need to, but more often than not, they won't need to, and it'll just default to today. And as you can see, I can do the same with distributed food, and again, delivery date defaults to the current date. So that was the first piece of acceptance criteria that we added, and that has been completed. And the next piece of acceptance criteria was related to the donors and the destinations. Previously, we had them selecting from the lookup fields, and with Salesforce, when there's a lookup field, it requires you to search for the donor and the destination, and that was just going to be too cumbersome for volunteers. So there was a new piece of acceptance criteria that volunteers should be able to select the donor and destination from a pick list. So what we have added is a new donor field in recovered food that is a pick list of the donors. And this is not a lookup field, but whenever a new recovered food entry is created or whenever an existing entry is edited, there will be a process builder that runs, finds the value of this pick list field, and then populates the lookup field with the associated donor. So we then accomplish both having a pick list as well as creating a lookup relationship between recovered food and donor. And we also tied our existing validation rules associated with donor to this field. So now if they select other from the pick list, but forget to actually fill in the other donor name field, then you will see they get an error. So all of that same validation still applies with this new pick list. And it's essentially the same with distributed food and donor. It is a destination pick list in distributed food that is tied to a destination lookup field. And again, all the same validation rules exist associated with this pick list. So I want to demonstrate this in action. I'm not going to do it from the community page, only because when you create a new record from a community page, it takes a couple minutes to show up, and I want to be able to demonstrate our results immediately. So I'm going to show it from the back end, but it would work the exact same on the community page. So let's say we have this pick list with destination and we want to set the destination to ACCA. I'm also going to take this opportunity to demonstrate our validation rules. So if we tried to save this, we will get an error that this field must be left blank because other was not selected. So I'll go ahead and leave this field blank. Now I can go ahead and save this record. And it doesn't show up here, but if I go back to this distributed food list, what you'll see is this new record, and under destination name, this is the lookup field. So like I said, we have a separate destination pick list field, but then this is the lookup field. And as you can see, even though I never selected a lookup, I just selected the pick list, it automatically populated that lookup field with the appropriate destination record, and it's linked to the proper destination. The same works with recovered foods. I can go in, I can create a new recovered food entry. Again, I'm selecting from a pick list field rather than the lookup field. And again, this would all be the same on the community page. And I'll just save this. As you can see, our pick list field has been set to other, but in the background, what is happening is we have this separate donor name lookup field that has also been set to other based on that pick list. And this is linked to our other donor record. And we did insert in the instructions about managing donor and destinations that if they edit the records in these fields at all, if they add a donor or destination, if they delete one, if they change one, they will need to manually go into distributed food and recovered food to change those pick list values as well. But as you can see, like I mentioned before, this accomplishes that acceptance criteria of allowing volunteers to select the donor and the destinations from a pick list while still connecting each of the records to donor and destination via a lookup field. So all those acceptance criteria have been met. The next thing I want to talk about is the automatic creation of client interaction records. Now, it's hard for me to demonstrate this in real time just because this is a temporal use case that's scheduled to happen at 6 p.m. But what I will demonstrate is the backend that exists to create this temporal use case, as well as the testing that we have done to show that this backend actually works like it's supposed to. So the first thing that we needed to do was create a Apex class. So let me find that Apex class. So this is our Apex class. It's called FlowRun. And what this Apex class does is it gets the current day of the week and stores it in a variable called the weekday. And then it passes that weekday as a parameter into a call for a flow called create client interaction. So it's a very simple Apex class. Basically, all it does is it starts this flow and passes the current day of the week into that client interaction flow. And I'll talk about that flow now. So if we go over to that flow, basically what the flow does is you can see it does a lookup of all of the routes. And this uses the weekday parameter that was passed into it and finds all of the routes where the delivery day is equal to the weekday passed into it by the Apex class. So for example, today it would pass in the day Monday, and this would find all the records, all the routes where the delivery day is Monday. Then it goes through, it loops through all of those routes, and for each route, it finds all of the clients that have that route ID as their route ID in the client. So it loops through all of those clients, and then for each of those clients, it creates a client interaction record and ties it to that client, and also sets the client interaction status to delivered and the scheduled date time to the current date time. And it does this for all of the clients on that specific route, and it does this for all of the routes that have a delivery day that is the current day. So that is how the flow works. And again, this flow is called by an Apex class called FlowRun. And what we've done is we've scheduled that class to run. So run scheduled client creation. This is a scheduled Apex. If I click manage, you can see that what this scheduled Apex does is it runs our FlowRun Apex class every single day. And it says 3 p.m. That is only because of an issue with time zones. 3 p.m. according to this is actually 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So this is set to run every single day at 6 p.m. And that will trigger the Apex class to call the flow, to find all the routes and all the clients and create the client interactions. So we've run this once. As you can see, this scheduled Apex class ran today at, again, it says 3 p.m., but it was actually today at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we can go over here and we can go to our client interactions, and you'll see the last 3 records that were created here. These, if I click on these, you'll see they were all created at 3 p.m. today, or actually 6 p.m. today. And that's each of these 3 records. And just to show that this is doing what it's supposed to do, so we have these 3 clients here. And if we look at our routes, we want to make sure that it created a client interaction for all of the clients that have a delivery date that's today. So we want to find, today is Monday, so we want to find all the routes that have the day is Monday, so that's route 9. And route 4, the delivery day is Monday. And then if we go to our clients, we'll want to find all of the clients who have a route ID that's either 9 or 4. So that's going to be Timmy Turner, Tina Adams, and Molly Good. So we want to make sure that there was a client interaction created for all 3 of those. Again, Tina Adams, Timmy Turner, Molly Good. A record was created for each of these at 6 p.m. today. And the status was set to delivered. We did not do this manually. This was done again by our scheduled Apex action. So that was a lot, but that was all to say that all of the acceptance criteria for that use case has been met, and we were able to complete that in its entirety. The last use case that we attempted to tackle in this sprint was the client delivery report. And for the most part, we completed all of the acceptance criteria. So let me open up the report. And that's the client delivery report that we're looking at. Now, what you'll see is they're able to filter by date, so that's one of the acceptance criteria. It's also grouped by status, another piece of the acceptance criteria. It shows all of the client interactions, and it shows all of the necessary fields: date, client name, client interaction ID, route ID, meal type, bag only, meals to report. So it shows all of those. It shows how many were delivered, how many were redone, and how many were missed. So we've completed most of the acceptance criteria for this user story. The one problem we are currently having is that this grand total is only supposed to include delivered and redone. It should not include missed records. Unfortunately, right now, we are still trying to figure out how to make this grand total not reflect missed records. It is showing all of the records. So we did not actually meet all of the acceptance criteria for that user story, but we have added that as a task to our next sprint, and we will be able to complete that user story with all of the necessary acceptance criteria by the end of our 5th sprint. So our goal for this sprint was really to just we wanted to knock out all of what we considered the most important remaining sprints, because we wanted to have this 5th and final sprint to really focus on customizing design, testing, doing all of that necessary hardening that you want to be doing in your final sprint. And so we didn't want to really have to be doing too much major actual user story work during this final sprint. And for the most part, we were able to accomplish that, minus this issue with the client delivery report. But this next sprint, it's very light for us, so we're really just going to be focusing on making sure everything looks and acts like it's supposed to, like we've promised it will throughout our sprints. So that has been this sprint, and we are looking forward to our final sprint. Thank you.